Capitol Report is a production of Senate Media Services.
This week, Senator Bobby Joe Champion explains a new law that will make it easier for people to have a second chance. And Senator Judy Seeberger talks about the new task force devoted to ensuring access to emergency services. Stay tuned for this and more on this week's Capitol Report. Welcome to this week's program. I'm Shannon Loehrke. Since 2014, Minnesota has had a petition-based system for people with low-level criminal convictions to have their records expunged. The Minnesota Clean Slate Act of 2023 will automate the expungement process beginning in January 1st, 2025. Joining me in the studio is the Senate's chief author of the new law, Senator Bobby Joe Champion. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. It's always so great to see you.
It's great to see you too. You have played a key role in legislation that may help people rebuild their lives. For example, ban the box, which prevents employers from asking about a job candidate's criminal history. Restore the vote, which allows for the restoration of voting rights upon completion of incarceration. And the Clean Slate Act of 2023. Why are efforts like these important to you?
Well, number one, in addition to that list that you just articulated, I'm also the chief author of the current expungement law. So I made sure that there was timelines in that law based on the offense, and a person would have to have some distance from when they finished probation up to when they were asking for relief. Well, why is because we live in a state that believes in second chances, that we believe in the possibility of people moving forward with their lives. So each of those bills and what I call important public policies is all in the belief that you deserve a second chance, and you should be judged on your skills and qualifications and not necessarily the past infraction that you have now paid your debt around, and that now you need to move forward because we want you to be a positive, contributing member of our society.
Jonathan Weinhagen of the Minneapolis Regional Chamber of Commerce backed the bill and said at a recent press conference that this is a jobs bill. He kept saying it, jobs, jobs, jobs.
Yeah. How
does expungement help the labor force? Because we do have a tight labor force.
Because we don't want anything that impedes a person from moving into the job market, right? And really being a contributing member to our labor force. We know that we have a great tsunami. We have to backfill those employment opportunities. So we need to get people who have the skills but are on the sideline, right? And so how do we get them back in? So it is a jobs bill. We want nothing to interfere with a person's ability to work and have their own dignity and humanity, make sure that they're making a livable wage for their families. And so it is a jobs bill. And we want Minnesota companies to have the greatest labor force so that we're able to continue to compete, not just with Iowa and Wisconsin, but globally. And so I believe that this is a jobs bill, and I think he's right.
The current system allows people to petition for an expungement, and actually not many do. There were some statistics about that. It's, I think, 5% or something. Why is it that so many people go through the petition process?
Well, they go through the petition process because that's the only avenue that we have right now. And when you think in terms of the petition process, it means you have to either yourself or pay someone to draft the petition. You have to now pay a filing fee. And if you have an infraction or even something you want expunged in, let's say, Ramsey and Dakota County, you have to do the same thing in those individual counties. You can't merge them together because guess what? Whoever is going to grant the relief or listen to the case must have jurisdiction. So you have people who just can't afford it. The average cost for a filing fee is somewhere around $382. And that's outside of everything else that you have to do in order to demonstrate that you deserve and should be granted the relief that you are requesting. So that's why you have a number of people who don't, because some don't know how to go through the process. They get frustrated about it, but also cost.
What kinds of crimes are eligible for expungement, and perhaps more importantly, what crimes are not?
So crimes that are eligible, for an example, for clean slate, are those low-level offenses, misdemeanors, gross misdemeanors, not felonies or not what I would call serious felonies. Those things are not eligible. Also, what is not well, those are eligible, felonies are not, but those other notions that are not eligible would be what we call enhanceable offenses. Enhanceable offenses start off as a misdemeanor, and if you if you got into the same circumstance again and didn't do anything worse or anything less, then instead of it being a misdemeanor, the next time it's a gross misdemeanor, and it goes up from there. So those offenses are not. DWIs would fall in that category, or domestic abuse cases would fall in that category. So it's an opportunity for those offenses where you either been exonerated or low level, or there's quite some distance between when that infraction happened up till now. Those are the type of cases that would be eligible, or matters that would be eligible.
Attorney General Keith Ellison pointed out that expungement does not mean that law enforcement loses access to those records, but it does seal the records then, so that people can get the housing or the educational opportunities or the employment opportunities that they are seeking. Why is this important?
You know, that was even important with our current expungement law. That doesn't change, because one of the things that we wanted to make sure of, and how we also got support from law enforcement and from county attorneys, is their ability to still see the record in the event that someone comes back into court, you know, because that's a part of the sentencing guidelines, whether someone has a criminal history or criminal history points. And we think it's important for those folks to still be able to see it, because if a person is law-abiding, we're not worried about them seeing it because there's nothing else to see. But if someone was to do something that they're not proud of, law enforcement have the ability to see it. Now, we don't want the public to see it if there's nothing there, because we don't want anything, again, to impede a person's ability to go forward. There are collateral consequences when you have something on your record. You mentioned those things, like not able to even get a grant to go to school, or to get an apartment because of something that was on your record. And that could have happened 20 years ago. But still, one's ability to see it creates in people's mind the probability or the possibility that they can't get the relief that they're looking for to move forward with their life.
Free expungement clinics will be offered around the state over the next year to help people who don't want to wait for automatic expungement. At the press conference, two individuals who have already or soon will have their records wiped clean offered their perspectives, and both mentioned fear, shame, and discomfort that they felt in facing their past choices. Even though the eventual result will be a clean slate, what do you say to those people who can identify with that sense of trepidation?
You know, thank you for that question, because those individuals were known as justice impacted individuals, and they talked about how their shame, you know, for others to know or to talk about something that didn't put them in the best light. What I would say to them is that sometimes certain things have to be exposed in order for it to get better. And if you want the outcome that we believe that you should have and deserve, and that would put you in the best position to move forward, then you have to come out. You have to ask for help. And we are here as people who support you. We're not here to shame you or to say, oh, what a bad person you are. No, none of us have been perfect individuals. Some of us just, you know, that little infraction or whatever we did not come to light and wasn't exposed. And so there's no judgment. We want you to come out because we want you to get through this process. I said earlier that sometimes fear creates paralysis. And we don't want you to be stuck in that place or space where you are, but we want you to move forward, show that mobility.
Finally, that said, people who aren't interested in the free clinic or a petition-based process, come 2025, will have any qualifying criminal history removed from the public record. So for those people, whether they even know it or not, the sky may be the limit.
You know, that's true. One of the things that we put in here is clean slate and automatic expungements for those offenses that can be determined and ascertained, because the BCA is going to look at the records and comb through those records between now and 2025, right? So we are moving forward in order to make sure we can identify those records and they would get this benefit. So even if they know about it immediately or not, they're going to get this benefit. Others who want to get the benefit and whose record may not be automatically determined to qualify can still go through the process of the petition process and notify us, and so that comes to attention. At the end of the day, we want Minnesotans to be able to go forward with their lives, be the contributing members to our society that they want to be and we want them to be. We know that when individuals are involved in pro-social activities, recidivism and other things go down and they feel a part of our human family. So thank you so very much.
Senator, no, I'm going to thank you. Senator Bobby Joe Champion, thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I really do appreciate it.
Governor Tim Walz held a press conference to announce a new $10 million initiative that will provide low-interest loans to small businesses.
One of the things that has always been a role of government, whether it's the Small Business Administration or DEED, is to have some of that access to capital working with private lenders, nonprofit private lenders, to make that happen. And today we're proud to announce the Expanding Opportunity Fund. The last legislative session put $10 million into that, and it'll be able to, as I said, to be able to access through lenders, nonprofit lenders, to the businesses you see in front of you. These folks up here have used other programs in DEED, but we think this one is just one more way to get folks into that. We're supporting entrepreneurs across the state. Once again, we've seen us either listed as the top 5 in business climates or one of the best states for longevity of business. All those things are, I think, working together to continue to try and make Minnesotans successful, but also to make this a place where we want to recruit people too.
Small businesses across the state drive economic growth and character and innovation in small communities and in large communities. In fact, nearly half of all Minnesota workers are employed at a small business. Our economy relies on entrepreneurs pursuing their dreams and working hard. And the people in this room know that well, that these dreams are made possible in part because of the support that we can offer at the state and federal level. Businesses are launching faster than they did before the COVID-19 pandemic. Over 61,000 businesses started in 2022 in Minnesota. That's nearly 1/3 above 2019. And we have the highest 5-year business survivability rate of any state in the country, meaning more businesses that start here succeed here. But we know businesses often need extra help to launch or grow, and that's where DEED and many of our partners come in to help. Small business owners and entrepreneurs are often unable to get the loans that they need to start or expand their businesses. And that's a critical miss for job creation and, as you heard, community development.
Burnout, stress, and low wages are some of the challenges facing Minnesota's emergency medical services personnel. The legislature has created a joint task force on emergency medical services to look for ways to bolster these essential services. Senator Judy Seeberger is a co-chair of the task force, and she joins me now. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Both you and task force co-chair Representative John Hewitt have worked as paramedics, and so you'll be bringing a level of expertise to this task force. What drew you to the profession, and what was your experience like as a paramedic?
Well, I started in the world of emergency medical services about 10 years ago. I joined the fire department, as one does. It was something that was a little bit interesting to me. They trained me up to the level of an EMT. I worked and I did that for a while. I was fascinated with it, wanted to learn more, went to school, became a paramedic, and so I've been doing that ever since. And it's been one of the most rewarding things I've ever done. It's important work. It's something that I really enjoy and try to continue to do. It's tough during session, but I still do get out on the ambulance here in the interim. And it's been one of the best things I've ever done.
So you continue to do this work as your schedule allows?
I do.
Wow. So in preparing to talk to you, I read several articles from the Rochester Post Bulletin, including a recent one about the Altura ambulance service, which may be forced to close. If it closes, other services in the area will have to fill in that gap, but then response times might be longer. How widespread is this problem?
This is really one of the major issues that we're seeing in the world of emergency medical services, and particularly in greater Minnesota, outside of the metropolitan area. Sometimes response times are getting beyond what I think people would consider reasonable. And when we're seeing services close and other services having to pick up the slack, then we're seeing the real challenges come into play with regard to response times and being able to staff an area appropriately. And keep in mind, if you have another town or another service staffing a particular area, now they are without service, so they would have to backfill if they got a call. So we're really kind of seeing this play out throughout the state, which is really one of the problems that we're going to be tackling with this task force.
The Minnesota Department of Health issued a report to the legislature in 2002, 21 years ago, that was called A Quiet Crisis, Minnesota's Rural Ambulance Services at Risk. Then just last year, the Office of the Legislative Auditor issued a report with recommendations also about emergency medical services and ambulance services. It seems that this isn't a new problem, but is it becoming an increasingly dire problem?
I think it is, for a number of reasons. First of all, the crisis that greater Minnesota has been facing is not getting any better. Add to that a workforce shortage. We have a global workforce shortage. We don't have enough people to staff every industry that there is, and particularly in emergency medical services. I think there's a lot of different reasons for that. A lot of it has to do with, in smaller towns in greater Minnesota, these are volunteer-based jobs. In the metro area, we have burnout. You know, we all went through COVID, and that took an enormous toll on all kinds of healthcare workers, from the nurses in the ED to the paramedics and the EMTs out on the streets, to the doctors and other healthcare providers within the system that were dealing with the tremendous influx of patients. So we have kind of a lot of factors at play that are really not helping the industry at all, and in fact leading to a greater decline in the ability to fill these positions.
So you kind of answered my question. There are rural challenges, and then there are urban challenges, and they are different challenges. Does that mean that solutions are going to look different from, say, Southwest Minnesota versus the Twin Cities region versus, say, the Iron Range?
I think they're all intertwined. And it has to do with the population that you're servicing, the amount of calls. You know, in the metro area, the call volume is just greater because we have a greater population. In outstate areas, the call volume is going to be less. So there are different needs, but they're all kind of interrelated in that we're looking at staffing challenges, we're looking at cost challenges when it comes to the cost of supplying an ambulance, and response times remain an issue statewide.
The Minnesota Ambulance Association press release from January said that 39% cite low wages as a primary reason for leaving the profession, and 65% of EMTs who don't renew their license are under the age of 40. So these people are leaving, you know, not even mid-career. And as you said, in some areas of the state, emergency medical services personnel are volunteers. So these are some of the issues that the task force will be looking at: burnout, training costs, wages. Are these all pieces of the pie?
They're all pieces of the pie. And I can tell you I work not only for a busy metro service, but I'm also on a what would be considered a volunteer ambulance service for a fire department. We're not truly volunteer, we're paid on call, which means we get paid per call, but it's not that much. And it's not something that you can really rely on in terms of making ends meet. You do it because you want to help your community, or because it's interesting, or you like your coworkers, or kind of a mix of all of that. But you know, if you drive down to the station at 1:30 in the morning, and you don't make a truck, and you drive home, you know, you made your $10 or whatever it is. It's not, you know, it's not for the money. So, we need to look at a way that we can continue to staff the volunteer or paid-on-call organizations, because that particular model isn't necessarily all that attractive to folks when, like I said, we have a workforce shortage across the board. So, why would someone want to wake up in the middle of the night to make $10 when, they can work somewhere else and have a more stable income? That's a big piece of the issue. And I think leads to some of the staffing challenges.
One editorial I read said that people then who are volunteer and they do go out on a call in the middle of the night then will sometimes have to call in sick or take a vacation day from their regular job the next day. So financial resources are an issue here. Does that mean taxes somewhere may need to go up in order to provide the funding necessary?
Not necessarily. I think we've looked at different models on how to be able to fund some of these services and how to augment the funds so that the staffing challenges are mitigated a little bit. I don't think we can rely strictly on taxes. I think there's other models that we can explore to see if we can't find ways to fund the services that have a lower revenue stream versus those that have a greater call volume.
Finally, the legislative auditor's report that I referenced earlier suggested that Emergency Medical Services Regulatory Board, the EMSRB, should improve its operations, and that the direction for that change would need to come from the legislature. So is it time that the legislature makes some considerable changes to the board that governs ambulance services?
I think changes are necessary. I think we do need to listen to what the legislative auditors have found. I was just meeting today with Representative Hewitt, and we were talking a little bit about what that might look like. And those are certainly conversations that we're going to have in the context of this task force. We do need, I think, to fine-tune our regulatory structure. I think we need to fine-tune the way that emergency medical services are handled within the state. And I think we need to take another look at the model and really tailor it to the needs of the people. One of the frustrations that Representative Hewitt and I both have is that people often don't think of EMS until they need it, and so it's something that doesn't necessarily get the attention that it has needed, which is why we're seeing reports from 20 years ago. So it's our hope and our expectation that with the two of us chairing this committee or task force, we can really start to tackle some of these issues.
Senator Judy Seeberger, it's a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.
At the time of his death in 1900, Cushman Kellogg Davis was relatively well known throughout the United States. Here's a look at the life of Minnesota's 7th governor. Governor Cushman Davis was the 7th governor of Minnesota, elected in 1873. He fought in the Civil War. He was an aide to General Willis Gorman. He was a U.S. District Attorney, and he was a member of the Minnesota House of Representatives when he ran for the governor's office. What brought him to St. Paul?
Well, he was pretty much raised in Wisconsin. So when the Civil War began, he became a lieutenant of the 28th Wisconsin Infantry. And he eventually ends up serving under Willis Gorman as his adjutant, kind of his right-hand person for that job during the Civil War. In 1864, he got malaria, so he was discharged. And so he went back to Wisconsin, try to recoup from his malaria, and they suggested go to St. Paul. That's a nice climate. You can get yourself, better if you move to that city. Well, he did that, and about the same time he moved to St. Paul, Willis Gorman was done with his military service. They were both lawyers, and so they joined together he joined Willis Gorman's law firm. So he started here as a lawyer and regained his health and became, one of our most noted politicians in the 19th century.
What was occurring in Minnesota when Governor Davis took office?
Well, it was a kind of a time of transition politically. You have pretty much the Republican Party in control of Minnesota politics. So you have a lot of, political leaders that were Civil War veterans, which helps them move into those different powerful positions. But Minnesota was growing and expanding agriculturally. But in the 1870s, when he became governor, we were just at the beginning edge of all these grasshopper plagues. So it was a pretty big catastrophic event for the state of Minnesota because farmers would plant their crops. A few weeks later, the grasshoppers would come through, destroy everything. So people were destitute. The agricultural products were down. People couldn't, feed their families. So he basically, as a governor, really pushed for some state support to give to the farmers in southern and western Minnesota because of the grasshopper plagues.
So this was an early example of state-sponsored disaster relief.
Right, yeah, and that was one of the first times, and we'll see that with other governors too in the 1870s. That's really the first time we really send or dedicate state money for a state emergency, basically, is what it became. And the other thing about that too, the railroads were a pretty big entity in the 1870s, and so they're expanding their power. You're building railroads throughout the state of Minnesota, so they had a lot of control. And so that was one thing he kind of pushed against. He didn't want them to become too powerful.
What role did Governor Davis play in establishing some parameters for the railroads? Yeah, to establish that Railroad Commission, which was pretty prominent in Minnesota politics all the way into probably the 1930s and 40s, when railroads kind of weren't as big a deal as they were back in the 1800s. Governor Davis sought to amend Minnesota's constitution to allow women to vote in school board elections and to hold office. Was this a precursor to women's suffrage? Yeah, there was a lot of push in the state legislature for women to vote. And this was kind of that first dent into breaking that wall of access to the political process. Because it didn't happen officially until 1920. Right, and so, but there were other governors before and after Cushman Davis that were advocating for women's suffrage. And there just wasn't enough support within the legislature to do that. But he was able to kind of open that door and push the idea that women can vote in school board elections, and they could even serve as school board members. So that was kind of the first step into kind of cracking that door open for future women's suffrage and rights for women a little bit more in Minnesota government. Cushman Davis not only served as governor of Minnesota, but then later served as a senator in the U.S. Senate. What are some of his other major accomplishments? He was very politically motivated. And so when he became governor, he was always keeping his eyes open for that big Senate seat. And so he only served the one term because he ran for the U.S. Senate seat the following term, and never was successful until the 1880s. So it took him, at least 12 years to get into that position. And so he was politically active, after he served as governor just within the Republican Party. When he became senator, he was chairman or, pretty influential senator in the Foreign Relations Committee. So when he was senator 1898, we had the war against Spain, so we had the Spanish-American War. And so he was the one who wrote up the ultimatum for us going to war against Spain. He also was part of the peace treaty, the Paris Peace Treaty, where they resolved, the land that the Spanish would have to give up. And so he pretty much was a mover and shaker within the Senate and was really well known throughout the United States at that time. Join us again next week as we delve into more topics affecting Minnesotans. I'm Shannon Loehrke, and on behalf of all of us at Senate Media Services, thanks for watching.